I don't want to go to school. Hi, I'm Chanel. This is episode 5 of the Piper Nell podcast. I'm a college student in the Los Angeles area studying physics, and as a senior, I'm also figuring out my post graduation plans. So, this podcast documents my journey in knitting, but also how it ties into my multiple interests and uncertainty in my future career, as I know I'm pretty young. So this is kind of a bonus episode. It comes 1 week early. Normally I record once every 2 days, but I just came back from spring break, so my workload's fairly light, and I had some extra time. Plus, because I had spring break, I finished a bunch of stuff, and I didn't want to load next week's episode too much. So, last thing we have. It's kind of weird that podcasters say we, like the royal we. Anyway, there exists a Ravelry group for this podcast. It's called the Piper Nell Podcast. So, first, knitting. In finished objects, I have, hold on, my computer. So, I actually only have one finished object and a bunch of whips to show y'all. First up, I finished my socks, my Patronus socks. So I explained the reasoning behind the name last episode. Eric from the Sticks and Twine podcast had this idea of Patronus socks, which refers to a defensive charm that wizards and witches cast in the Harry Potter universe. And so you summon basically a guardian spirit using a very positive, profoundly happy thought, like your family, your loved ones. And so the colors in this sock to me suggest kind of the friends and loved ones in my life and the happy memories I would summon if I was a witch and had a Patronus. So the yarn is Vesper variegated sock yarn, which is 100% merino. The needles I used US size 1 or 2.25 millimeters, and a 40-inch circular. So I used that for magic loop, 2 at a time. And it was my first time doing the fish lips kiss heel, which I'm really a fan of. It was pretty easy. The instructions were really clear. And then for the toe, I used instructions for a rounded toe decrease from Mina's 2 at a time sock recipe by Mina of the Knitting Expat by Mina of the Knitting Expat podcast, which I will link in the show notes. That's unfortunately my only FO. I was hoping to show a cowl I've been working on, and it's off the needles, but I didn't get the chance to block it. So it's the Mai Tai cowl, and I'm using Lion Brand Woolies, which is mostly acrylic, and I was going to steam block it, but since I live in a dorm and I have pretty limited access to equipment, I was going to go around the dorm and borrow like someone's iron, and I haven't found one yet, just haven't had the time. Oh, that brings me to whips. I'm going to try to make this episode short. So, first is my self-care shawl, which is right next to me. The pattern is Naked Gardening by Christina Villimaite. And last week I actually forgot to explain another aspect of the name, why I'm calling it self-care shawl. So not only did I buy the yarn as an act of self-care, to make me feel good after a stressful event in my life, the pattern, which was really fitting, I didn't entirely plan on it. Well, this intention kind of evolved as I worked on the shawl. So within the pattern itself, Naked Gardening, it was originally released as a mystery knit along. And with each clue comes a set of mindfulness exercises. that are meant to be kind of practiced as you knit each section, and like have you reflect on various things in your life, how to be more aware of some toxic thought processes in your head. It's a good pattern. It's very pretty. It's also almost done. It's getting big. So my major modification has been adding stripes to their garter body. And last week I was about halfway through this lace section. I am now done with that and moving on to so what I have left is a little transitional garter body section, and then I start kind of roughly edging. So that's going to be really pretty. The needles I'm using are Chaogu Lace US2 or 2.75 millimeters, also a 40-inch circular. I like the lace tips. They're nice and pointy. This pattern has a few double decreases, knit three togethers, which I've had some trouble poking my needle in, but I think that's more due to me and maybe the yarn being a little splitty. So the yarn, I forgot to mention, this darker purple is, as you can see, I'm striping a darker purple with a lighter purple. And the dark purple is Suri Elegance in Purple Mountain Majesty, which is 100% alpaca and lace weight. And the lighter purple is Cascade Alpaca Lace in Amethyst Header lace, which is also lace weight. And what was I going to say? I'm blanking. But yeah, this is going to be a super pretty shawl. The alpaca feels so nice. I've already kind of geeked out to the yarn, so I'm going to spare you all from that. My next whip, which I will talk more about during the kind of my video log section, is a hat that I just kind of randomly cast on. So here's what I have so far. I'm not using a specific pattern. It's just, I started with a 3x1 rib, which I also used for my Patronus socks. I'm kind of digging 3x1 rib right now. Just cast on a bunch of stitches and did a few decreases. Not decreases. Did a few increases for the main bodies to make it a little slouchy, and now I'm just knitting in endless stockinette. The yarn is a mystery yarn that I had, and there's a bit of a story. So there's a story behind how I started this hat, and there's a story behind how I got this yarn. The yarn I got from a festival local to me that's at a retirement community called the Pilgrim Place. If you remember my first episode, I was applying for a fellowship that was offered by kind of a foundation within the Pilgrim Place. And they're a service-oriented, kind of globally focused retirement community composed of, it started out as retired missionaries coming home from abroad, and then expanded to include all faiths, and now it's full of people who retired from careers in activism, social justice, spirituality, and want to stay aware of their world and the evolving political scene. So they have an annual festival, which is a lot of fun. Have a lot of vendors, and a lot of the residents practice some sort of craft as a hobby, but people who do pottery, stained glass, knitting, crochet, they bring out their stuff and sell it during this festival, and it's a really cool festival. It's really kid-friendly. If you're ever in the Claremont area, highly recommend this. It's towards the middle end of November, if you ever catch it. So they also opened up the kind of knitting room that was run by residents, and they were selling some of their yarn stash, and This yarn, I got this yarn in a huge Ziploc gallon bag that I filled it up, and it was what, $5? Yeah, it's probably some sort of acrylic. I think it's sport weight. Probably baby yarn, judging by these pastel colors. But I really like the way this is striping up, and you also kind of get these speckles. Yeah, I felt like making a hat. And more on the story later. In Naps needle adjacent projects, I have something that I've so this is kind of a whip, kind of a nap. Sorry, let me put this away. It's kind of an in between. I just started it this morning. I swatched, and now I'm like properly starting on the pattern, but I just have a couple of rows in. It's on a US 5 or a 3.75 millimeter needle, and this is also kind of a story behind how I got this yarn. So this is some mysterious. You're seeing a pattern here, right? All the mysterious yarns have a story. So this is some mysterious silk or silk blend yarn that a friend actually gave to me in exchange for. This is basically the deal. She told me, "Hey, I have this yarn. I don't know what to do with it. If I give it to you, will you make me a top in exchange for keeping the leftovers?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." There's a lot. There's way more. There's going to be a lot left over after I'm done with the top. So I'm going to actually get the bag here. This is all of it. It all feels the same. And I've never worked with silk yarn. It's very slippery, way more slippery than what I'm used to. And so I'm not sure how much silk is in it. But you have this more variegated blue, and then you have this really nice royal blue over here. And so the pattern I'm going to use, the top pattern that you wanted, and I also really like it, is the cap sleeve lattice top by Pearl Soho, which is a really cool construction. You start from the bottom, the back. You start from the back hem, and then work it into flat, work the body, and basically you go up the back, over the shoulders. There's some sort of decreasing and casting back on for the shoulders, and then you knit the front piece, and then you seam up the sides. It's so cool. So yeah, I'm thinking, I'm using this royal blue first. I'm thinking of kind of striping or color blocking these two blues. It's going to be cool. And so the pattern calls for one color for the body, and then one color for the shoulder yoke area is this lacy lattice. And she also gave me yarn for that. Let me get it. This is the yarn she gave me. It's also kind of a mystery, because this is all the label says. It says ice yarns. And the bag says Avorio cotton, but I looked up Avorio cotton on the Ice Yarns website, and it looks nothing like this yarn. Well, I mean, it looks something like it because it's still in a vague string-like shape, but so the ball is wound into a different shape on the website. It's not tweed, like this seems to have some sort, like a bit of tweed, like tweed-like nups. And it's, I poked around more on Ice Yarn's website, and it looks an awful lot like a yarn that Ice also makes called Folk Tweed, which is a wool blend, which would still make a nice top. I guess that's the mystery cap sleeve lattice top. And I have one more nap. So this is also a request from a friend. I am going to knit it out of Lion Brand woolies in their color. It's called the Forest Green Heather. I'm not going to show you the yarn. Sorry. Oh, that sounded so mean. the pattern's going to be scroll work. You'll see it next week. All right. Okay, this is going to be the start of my mini spinning section, but it also kind of goes into naps. So I finished my third hand spun, which was on the spindle last week. This was, of the things I worked on most over spring break, I probably worked on this yarn the most because I got ambitious with plying it. So here it is. It's actually a nice sized skein. So my first two spinning projects turned out a bit small, and so I noticed that, but I had filled up the spindle that I had before plying them together. So I was like, well, okay, I can get twice the yardage if I fill up the spindle once, wind it off, and then fill up the spindle again. And then I had a bigger spindle that was lighter too, that could hold a lot more wool. So I plied them together using that bigger spindle. And so this I showed last week is spun from more mystery fiber from the group stash, and it's this brown, crimpy. It's like it's a little greasy. But it was actually very easy to draft. And so it's still pretty uneven. It's probably the most even thing I've spun so far. It's not balanced at all. If this wasn't wound into a skein and I just had the loop hanging here, it would twist so hard. It varies between, I would say, like a worsted and a super bulky, but I'm getting better. So that's my very brief spinning section. Next, I'm going to move into my video blog portion. So if you're only interested in the fibery, crafty things, it was great seeing you, and I hope you drop by next time. On to me being a college student and spring break! Spring break! Spring break was so fun. Actually, it was just very needed. I spent most of it. It wasn't very exciting. I didn't, get drunk and jump off a boat or anything. Where is that from? So, I spent most of it watching TV and sitting around and knitting. Sorry, there were people outside. So, but the highlight was the last Saturday of break, I went out with some friends to the desert, and we had a big bonfire party. So I'm in Claremont, and it's kind of on the east side of the Los Angeles area, and so it's pretty close to the I-15, which is the major highway connecting Los Angeles and Las Vegas. I drive there all the time, going back and forth between these two cities since my family's still in Las Vegas. So we went up the 15, about just past the mountains that separate the San Gabriel Valley from the rest of the Mojave Desert, and found we were just kind of in the middle of nowhere, and we brought a bunch of wood that we had collected around campus. I was actually driving the huge van loaded up with the wood. It was an 8-person van. Do you know how many people were in the van? 2, including me. The rest of the van was filled up with wood and 2 trash cans, one which was full of more wood, smaller pieces that we would use as kindling, and then one was filled with ice for a keg and drinks. So it was pretty chill. We weren't going crazy in a desert. The most exciting thing we did set off a couple of Crisco bombs. Those were so fun. At the end of this episode, I'm going to put in a video I took of someone else lighting a Crisco bomb. We lit 2. I lit the first one, and the video is of the second one, and I'm still bugging people for the video of my Crisco bomb. But that's sure to take this episode out with a bang. And then went to bed pretty late. It was getting cold. So I didn't bring a sleeping bag because my suite mates had borrowed all the sweet sleeping bags for their own spring break trips. So I had a blanket and pillow, and I just went and slept in the van that I drove there. And the the moon was pretty bright over the weekend, so stargazing wasn't stellar, unintended. But there was a cool moon set that I woke up around 4 a.m. and the moon actually was just setting then, and then that left the sky dark for a good hour and a half. I just couldn't go back to sleep, even though I only had gotten 4 hours of sleep. And then at sunrise, I wanted to get out and watch the sunrise. So here's where the mystery hat comes back in. I'm actually calling it the sunrise hat because I didn't have any projects for the road since I was driving. Normally when I drive, I'll bring some sort of knitting project, but I threw a ball of yarn and some needles into a bag just in case, and I saw the opportunity when everyone else was asleep. The night is dark, but the desert's about to wake up. So I got out my yarn and needles, sat by the smoldering embers of the fire. It was still warm by the fire because we had a big log that had just been burning overnight. And as the sun rose, I cast on the hat and was just knitting away. My fingers were pretty cold from being in the desert. Gets really cold at night because there is no moisture to hold in the heat when the sun goes down. So my fingers are kind of shaky. I definitely was not knitting as at my normal speed, but it was just such a relaxing way to cap off a cool, like, a good night out with friends. And so one more funny thing that happened in the morning after the sun rose was, so I slept inside in the car, which really is pretty comfy. Like, you just lean the seat back and put my pillow down. I put my pillow down and covered up and just passed out for however long I slept, 4 hours. So not a great night's sleep, but hey, I'm used to being sleep deprived as a college student. So most people actually did sleep outside. They brought their own sleeping bags, and at the end of the night, there was a cluster of 4 sleeping bags. And so they were lined up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in the morning, when we woke up, I kind of saw this in the dark when I was sitting by the fire and knitting as the sun rose. I did notice this kind of, but because I didn't see the original configuration, I didn't know what was up. So when the sun rose, it turns out one of them had somehow overnight. So I said 1, 2, 3, 4. This number 2, they had moved somehow 20 feet that way. In their sleeping bag, they had a sleeping mat under them. So they had somehow taken their sleeping bag themselves, their body, and a sleeping mat, like 20 feet across this bare sand and rocks. It was completely mysterious. The other 3 people sleeping in that cluster woke up first, and they're like, "Where's this person? What? Is that them? How'd they get over there?" And then the person woke up, and they were like, they sat up, and they're like, "How did I get over here?" I think the common consensus of the group was aliens. Aliens. I don't know if I should say this next detail. Yeah, whatever. It's embarrassing enough. So this person has a habit of sleeping naked. And so they were completely naked inside the sleeping bag, and their clothes were in a little pile where they had originally put their sleeping bag. So I woke up, and we're like, someone should get their clothes to them. Yeah. I was really tempted to keep the clothes in their original spot and see how does someone move in a sleeping bag? Do you like inchworm? Do you like stand up and hop? They tried to do the whole like if you're lying on your back and you kick out your legs and hop and do the actiony hop up. It didn't work. It looked hilarious though. So that was that was the highlight of my weekend, just spectating these shenanigans. And that's really been it. Got back to class on Monday. It's kind of been a struggle getting back to school. My brain, I don't think my brain's still in school mode. Like yesterday, I woke up with my alarm at 8 a.m., climbed down from my bed. That's my bed right there, actually. It's lofted, so I have more room over there for storage and just living area. My alarm was on my desk right here, and I reached over and I turned it off, sat down on my desk, and then promptly passed out at my desk for until 11 a.m. And I was very late for a meeting that I was supposed to come to at 11. School's a struggle. Yeah, I guess that takes us to what's on my radar. So this section is where I talk about things that I'm watching, listening to, reading, and so on. For knitting podcasts, I've been trying a bunch of new podcasts that I'm sure y'all have heard about, but I've definitely gotten into more podcasts since I've started podcasting, and it's a really great community. For one I've been watching is the Crafty Nomad by Kim, who is also in Southern California. And she's great. She's really fun to listen to. She does multiple crafts: knitting, crochet, beadwork, sewing. You're never going to get bored watching her podcast. So, hey Kim. Next, I've been watching the podcast is called Kniterature by Sydney, and I so jive with her sense of humor. She's really into puns. Each one of her sections is punny based on knitting and literature, as her title would suggest. She's trying to read through all of the just kind of like the classical canon of Western literature, and so a lot of her knits are themed on a lot of her knits have literary themes. She also has great taste in lipstick. She matches her lipstick to her favorite FO of her episode, and so her first episode, she just makes this great impression. She shows up in like beautiful dark green lipstick. I actually have a similar shade. I should wear it more often. So it's kind of like this shade of green I'm wearing here, actually. Anyway, hey Sydney. The next two I started kind of watching in conjunction. I started watching the Socksetera podcast by Shannon, who's in Canada, and I really admire her honesty and her openness in her podcast. I first heard about her podcast, and it's been on my list of podcasts to try out for a while now, because she discussed her experience with mental health, depression, and anxiety, and it's been really heartening seeing the kind of the knitting community and craft and fiber community support her in her experience and accept her. And I have lots of being mentally ill with my depression and anxiety has been a huge part of my college experience, and so I'm so glad to see someone speaking out about it. At some point, please remind me. I will talk about that. I feel like that would take an entire episode, maybe a standalone video. So if anyone's interested in that, I will work on that. She also initiated a very provocative discussion on the use of acrylic yarn, and that ties into this last podcast I'm going to talk about, which is Knitting for Twins by Sarah, who also goes by Yarn Lab Canada. So she currently has a podcast. She is expecting twins, And so her podcast documents what she's knitting for her twins, which are so cute. I love seeing the little baby clothes and the toys. She crocheted this awesome Blastoise. I'm just like, wow. Okay, I've said Harry Potter is my childhood. Pokemon's also my childhood. Pokemon is still a thing among me and my friends. I'm proud of it. I don't care. And so Sarah made this great video, very thoughtful, very cogent discussion on acrylic and how fiber snobbery can really be a classist dialogue. Like, I use a lot of acrylic because it is cheap, but it also has its uses. It's durable, it's washable, it's easy to take care of, so it's great for knits. I'm basically summing up her video. So if you haven't watched the video, you should totally go check out Sarah's video as well as her podcast. And so non-knitting things on my radar. I mentioned last week I've been watching Bob's Burgers, and so I've started watching another adult cartoon called its title is BoJack Horseman. BoJack Horseman is a great show. Bob's Burgers is like silly funny. Really, you're probably not going to get so super emotional while watching Bob's Burgers besides laughing your butt off. BoJack Horseman is also funny. It's extremely dark comedy. I love the cynicism and nihilism of the of the series. When it isn't being funny, it's also just heartbreaking, but it's the scathing satire of celebrity culture, and it's great. It also relies so much on puns. You realize that I appreciate puns, right? Yeah. And then the last thing on my radar is a book that's titled The Trial of Temple Anarchy. This is a book that my friend lent me. She was in a class last semester on a different approach to, I forget the exact title of the course, but the focus of the course, it was history, but it took an kind of alternative approach to history. She calls it her medieval peasants class. And rather than trying to piece together history like with this common narrative of major events, this kind of history tries to it just looks at how the common people lived. I think the course is titled like History of the Common People or something. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so this is one of the books that she read for the class, and it's actually it's a collection of documents related to the witchcraft trial of a woman named Temple Anarchy. Temple Anarchy was this nickname for her, and she was an elderly woman, quite educated for someone of her class. She was married to a farmer, she was widowed, so as an independent woman, older, but she knew all these, she knew herbals. People came to her as a wise woman for her healing kind of potions and stuff. And they had no problem asking her to perform tasks of witchcraft if, it would make their pigs feel better. But if it went wrong, then I guess enough of these accusations had built up and she got accused and put on trial as a witch. And so it's really just a collection of legal documents. The authors don't really try to lay over a strong narrative. It leaves you to piece together what happened. Her character, she is so strong, and really she stays defiant until the end. Spoiler alert: she does end up executed, but you can see she was really an exceptional woman, and there are some interesting characters, and some pretty ridiculous accusations leveled against her that, I don't know, are funny in their own way. Like I said, I like my black comedy. So, Trial of Temple Anarchy. The editor is Peter Morton, and the witchcraft trial took place in Brunswick, Germany in 1663. So the documents were translated by Barbara Doms. And that's all I have. I hope, yeah, this is going to turn out to be a shorter episode, which I'm glad for. I don't want to have y'all sitting here forever. So, thanks for listening and watching. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as Pipernell, Pipernell. You should also join the Ravelry group, the Pipernell Podcast. Say hi, introduce yourself, share your projects, and, you know, I really like to start conversations and build community. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and join the Ravelry group. I'm just going to say that once again. Did I say that already? Join the Ravelry group. All right, thanks again. I will see you next week. Hope you have a great day. Bye.